Okay, today we're just going to be working through the final episode of Mob Psycho 100. I finished it a while back and I went through and rewatched it just to make sure I can have everything kind of sorted out in my head and kind of figure out what exactly I wanted to make sure and went through. It was a good episode, definitely a good episode, good season finale. It had all the right parts for it. And I kind of just wanted to talk about it, kind of say what worked, and what this ending does for the story and for us going forward. Main thing, of course, is this was a action sequence final. Obviously, there is the whole aspect of the fight between Mob and I never remember his name, so we'll call him Tai-san. There we go. See, where's the tie? There we go. Tai-san. So basically this is the final showdown between them. We've had a lot of build-up between the previous episodes, so it's basically kind of set up for a pinnacle fight of the basically 1v1 between him and Mob. And this is what the kind of the whole aspect has been building up to. It makes sense. And now we get to see it play out in fruition. Other than that, I mean, the story... This kind of episode kind of played out pretty standard, at least the first 10 minutes. The first 10, 15 minutes-ish was kind of just this fight sequence. And it kind of followed a fairly typical good versus evil fight sequence, and we'll go into that a little detail. Kind of the flow that it followed, more or less, is basically there's an attack. Oops. An attack. Let's see. Get my paper here sorted. There we go. Attack. Someone attacks. The other person defends. And then there's a line. This line is kind of what the characters say to each other. And this is always a bit funny to see what people come up with, because it is kind of awkward and you don't really notice it. You don't really notice too much talking, especially. It just seems a little bit... But when you think about it, it is a little bit odd that people kind of talk during their fight, realistically. It's almost like if you're having some sort of sports combat between two people and stuff, they're kind of more or less just completely locked into what they're doing. They're not worried about talking or anything like that, but not here. But at the same time, it would be odd if there was no talking at all. If basically it was just complete silence or something in between the whole fight. I mean, obviously that's something you can do, and it would be interesting to see how that played out. Some people, I feel like, could probably do that. Most animes, definitely not. There's definitely no way not to have talking. Basically, you have to have some sort of monologue, and it goes from there. And then, of course, we have the reverses. So this is kind of our sequence, basically. And then this kind of goes back and forth. So the reverse being that if this is Mob doing the attacking, then so-and-so does the defense, and then so-and-so does the line, and it basically goes back the other way. So if we were going to do this and it goes like this, here's our arrows for progress, of course. And then we got one down here, then it goes attack, and of course defense, and then line. And it basically just goes back the other way, and then of course try and draw my reverse. And then basically trade off this. This is the whole sequence. This is kind of what it's made up of. And of course, in between here, you have the cool parts of the aspect, which is the cool action sequences. This is kind of the, where they shoot bullets at each other, throw buildings, and kind of all the animation. This is where the animation team really takes off. And this is one of those animes that has a really good. They've got a good production team behind it. You can tell that it definitely shows. But so far, this is kind of what is the meat and potatoes. This is what kind of fills the time, basically, from here. And then, and this is kind of how most fights, I feel like, follow this trend, basically. And you can follow this more or less pretty closely, and I don't think anyone will really notice it too much, because, of course, you don't want people to notice that there is kind of a rhythm, an exact rhythm or anything like that. So you can do some variation in terms of attack, defend, something like that, or anything. Basically, just to kind of wrap it up on itself and kind of envelop the story within this sequence so that we can kind of have a way. So if we were going to write our own fight sequence, we could take this blueprint and pretty easily, you can see how it would pretty easily go from here. Now, the next thing, of course, you may notice is the next thing that usually will happen is somewhere in between one of these sequences, we will have basically it'll be a level up or a resolve. That was the other word I had for it. And then basically this kind of acts as a whole unit. We're going to cut through the silence there. This is kind of the whole unit we're going to be kind of evolving with. This is what the story uses for it. Essentially what it's doing is basically attack, defend, line, reverse, attack, defend, line, and basically all of this is building up towards a specific type of, it works on two fronts. So the two fronts that it works to is whenever you have a fight between the hero and the villain, you kind of have a number of things going at the same time. So we've got over here, we've got our hero, and then we've got our villain. And these fall into the symbolic kind of realms of everything. Let's draw this up here. And then our little bitty verses. That exclamation point. Oops, into my paper. Hero versus villain, and then over here, basically the rest of this bubble, we've got the villain that exists over here. This is more or less evil. And this is good. And this is what the symbolic fight between the two heroes. So basically on this level, basically here we have combat. Of course, in this way, it's psychics. Psychics more or less fighting on this level, and then on this level you have more or less the moral victory, the moral fight that's going on. And what this does is it allows you to have multiple things going on. There was one time I was watching the Newsroom, the Aaron Sorkin, and they were basically I was just kind of listening to the dialogue his characters were doing, and they basically had the dialogue working almost on two different layers, essentially. So they were talking basically about two different things. So they had two conversations at the same time, which kind of let them go off in different directions. One was going up here, you have the job, and then the other one talking about the Jersey scene in some sports movie. I honestly haven't seen it. But basically, what the conversation does, the reason why the conversation works is that it's going in two different directions. So you've got two things happening twice as much. If both are done poorly, then it sucks really bad. But if done well, you basically have twice as much going on in the same amount of time. So what this does is basically it helps add to your fight. So basically you've got your fight sequence here, and you need to have something is at stake basically for each time they're fighting, and this is where this adds into the resolve and level up more or less basically from here, because basically what you got here is a reaffirmation of this. So this whole these two first lines, basically the attack defense line, this just exists on this combat level right here. And of course over here we have the level up and resolve. Basically what I mean is that's when a character goes like, no, I'm definitely going to stop this person, and then they seemingly get stronger or something like that. Or the other equivalent of this is someone in Fast and Furious, one of those race car movies, gets even angry and somehow floors their car yet again for the 5th time, and they go even faster, and it gives you that really impactful like vroom moment where they like shoot out of the camera machine and everything. That's all cool and all that. But this is how a lot of the fights will work, is they work on both of these levels. So basically this does a number of things. It fulfills kind of we'll go into symbolism probably at a later point, but basically it kind of shows, it rises the stakes basically. It helps raise the stakes for what's at play here. So it's not just this fight, the combat fight, where it's like the battle of wills and strength, trying to see who's stronger and everything like that. Because you'll notice in the fight you constantly have Mob trying basically to save the Thai guy, Tai-san. He's trying to save him from himself. And then also Mob is also fighting against himself with self-doubt, basically. He's trying to remain in control while at the same time managing enough power to fight this guy. And that kind of exists. And all of that is wrapped up in the same aspect where it gives you this extra level of what is at stake for the fight. Because remember, a fight is just a fight. And if it's just a combat, then it doesn't really mean anything. That's the reason why you have to front load it and back load it basically, and add all this extra stuff for what's at stake, more or less. That's the thing why, you know, in One Piece, the fight outside Impel Down. Impel Down, I think it was at Impel Down, or maybe it was Water One. I can't remember what it was. Basically, when they fight to rescue, spoiler alert, skip this part if you don't know it, Ace. Go to rescue Ace, more or less. This fight works because they're trying to rescue Ace, basically. And that's what makes this fight so awesome, because we like Ace, he's cool, he's helped us out in the past, he's Luffy's brother, you know, you have all this aspect that's going into it. So it's not just a fight for combat strength to see who's stronger. Basically, we have a fight that represents something greater, and that's what really adds the oomph extra to it. You know, in Naruto, there's the good one between, of course, Naruto, our favorite gutsy ninja, and Sasuke. I think that's how you spell it. Sasuke. Basically, their fights are always great. That's kind of what makes it kind of gives it that extra oomph. The other one is the Naruto versus Pain. You know, this is the whole, all these kind of work on these extra levels, so it basically adds extra. Think of it like the salt, you know, the salt to your meat. Basically, the meat is the actual fight and the combat in and of itself, but there has to be something more at play in order for there to be something actually at stake, basically. And again, we're following this format. This whole format is kind of what we're going. So basically, Mob will attack, the Thai guy will defend, he'll say a line like, you can't defeat me, you're just like me, and then it'll attack and defend. And then essentially what this will also do is this also adds kind of like a number of things, is it adds a struggle, because Mob has to start off on the same level as Tai-san. I actually need to figure out his name. Let me figure out his name real quick. Let me see. Let me move my hands. It's really going to annoy me if I don't figure out his name. Okay, so we've got Sho, Suzuki. That's what it looks like, his name. We're going to call him Suzuki. Alright, so we're going to call him Suzuki. There we go. Got his name. Nailed it. First try. So, they're going to fight now. Of course, if Mob is stronger, then the fight ends after one of these. But we want this to go through a few full cycles in order for it to feel like a real fight. We have basically going through rounds. So if this is a boxing match, you know, if we're going through the boxing ring, basically, then we want to make sure that the fight lasts more than one round. Let's see. Because if it doesn't, then it just seems like it was too easy. There's no real option to lose. They're probably not actually going to lose. Let's see. Yep. And basically, just so it also kind of reinforces, okay, well, it wasn't really that close of a fight. Therefore, you don't really realize how much is at stake, basically. Because when you drop the ketchup bottle on the floor, there's not a chance that it's going to explode and kill everyone. So it's not that big of a deal. If there is that chance, that everything, you know, your family, your safety, you know, all your hopes and dreams, all of that kind of comes into play and kind of becomes a lot more impactful for it. So basically they're going to fight, and so this, what also does is it gives kind of a natural way to show, you know, Mob gets stronger, they get stronger, and then at the end of the day, eventually what will happen is Mob then defeats Suzuki. Defeats Suzuki, and eventually then it provides the answer as to how he was able to defeat Suzuki. The how part kind of adds towards a backdrop of everything, so it doesn't always come into play, but people notice it if it's gone. This is where you'll see. I was kind of, sometimes this person, not always, but basically if there was a continuity error or something like that, or like, wait a minute, how did this character get there? Or the one that I was thinking of is in Witcher Season 2, when Geralt and Yennefer are arguing. This is in the show, obviously. They're arguing and they're traveling, and then, let's see, they go from city, doesn't really matter, to Kaer Morhen. Morin, and I know that these places are like hundreds of miles apart. This is like 1 to 2 weeks travel at a minimum. But they should, it seemingly go up in a day. And this goes against the how. Now, obviously, most people don't care. Most people don't notice, obviously, because the showrunners kept that in. So they didn't care either. But it matters, because once those start to stack up, you start to realize it starts to kind of break the reality of it. And if a show doesn't seem real, even if it is a fantasy show, then there's kind of no point. What's the point of it, more or less? So basically, we have this sequence going through a few times, basically, and then also adds a kind of answers the obvious question is if these characters are going to talk to each other, what are they going to talk about? And that's kind of where, as writers, most people never think about that. They never think about the placeholder lines, more or less, between the two fights, where as opposed to just take that, let's see, ow, or get you. These are lines that people would probably naturally say, but if you're going to have your characters talk during the fight, you have to have something that they're going to talk about, and you have to set what. So what are they going to talk about? If you're having a dinner party with that awkward couple that you don't really know, but you kind of need to get to know, or feel like you have to get to know, or for whatever reason you just stuck at them at the dinner table, what are we going to talk about? Let's see. There we go. We'll put that down there. What are we going to talk about? And this is where the it also kind of wraps in with this whole idea of the morals. So this is the moral fight you can exist on this one. So not only are we fighting on combat, like I said before, we've got the moral fight, more or less, as well. So Mob is here, and he's got Suzuki. And he kind of has this moral fight that he's also going in addition to the combat fight. And this is what it is. This is kind of the difference also. It goes into the classic tale of good and evil. You can kind of see this play out in Batman, more or less. So if we got Batman, and let's see, the one I'm thinking of is the second Christopher Nolan one, where you've got, let's see, Two-Face and the Joker. And basically this whole idea of, at what point do you turn into the bad guy, basically. And that's kind of what's going on with it and everything. And this is just how it goes. This is what's at play. And basically it's the same, the classic overused, I would say overused, but it's really good, so maybe it's not overused. The Nietzschean line, be careful you don't become the monsters that you trying to kill, or I butchered it, but you get the idea. It's the classic, you become the monster that you're trying to defeat, you become the villain that you're trying to stop. The Superman Red Dawn or something, Superman decides to stop everything from, to take control of the world, and then he becomes the villain, more or less. So what we've got here then is, as we have this fight, we have this kind of classic good and evil. This checks off a number of boxes. It gives us what to talk about. We have something to talk about, which we need, as opposed to just ... silence. Ow. Because you get hit by a rock. It gives you more than that. It gives you more than just the placeholder, like, take that, I'll get you, which some of the shows do use that. So it gives you something to talk about it, but also adds to this stakes aspect. And this is what you want. This is what good story writing is about. It's about taking all of these aspects and kind of really working and building them together to give you something that can help build the story. Because remember, this fight is just you have to add extra stuff to the fight. So if we're going to have a fight, let's see, you need to have something more at play. So instead of this, it's not just a fight of Mob, let's see, versus Suzuki. What you've got also going into this fight is the moral victory. So is evil, more or less, let's see, good versus evil. Mob versus himself in terms of character growth, basically. Is this we're looking to see the character's growth. He's going to save others. He's got responsibility that's going in on him. He's responsible. He's got to protect everyone. Let's see. There we go. Responsibility for others. All of this goes into the fight and makes us want him to win. Because remember, what kind of the main aspect that we're countering is this: you really have to add a whole lot of stuff into these fights because, you know, who's the name of the show? Who's the main character? This is the main character. Is the MC going to die? Obviously not. But you have to make them forget that. You really have to front load as much and give as much emotion into this fight in order to make it actually impactful, to make the audience care, to make it matter. Because everyone knows those are the stories, the fights that really matter are the ones that are really emotionally charged. And you can really see this in some of the longer animes like One Piece and Naruto, where they just have an insane number of fights going on. And basically the ones, it really starts to drag for the ones where you can tell that there's not that much emotionally at stake. You can kind of realize that this is an arc or something like that. You can kind of want it to be over. You kind of want it to move on to the next thing. The side characters are boring. There's nothing at stake. And whether they win or lose, it seems like you'd kind of rather they just move on, more or less. And that's kind of what you're fighting in. Those are worst cases. I'd say the main... Not the main one. I didn't really care for the Skypiea arc in One Piece, and so I was kind of hoping that they would hurry up and just move on. That was what I wanted them to do. Is I kind of want One Piece. I didn't want them to go through this all over again. You know, One Piece gets that giant golden ball strapped to his hand. It gets knocked off all the way down, and then he has to come all the way back up, all the way back up, all the way back up. And I wanted to die and them just to move on to the next thing. Because I was like, you know what? It wasn't that bad, but it was definitely not the most exciting arc that I've ever gone through with them. So for that one, so this is kind of how what you want to be thinking about if you're looking at doing a fight scene. This kind of all this comes into play in terms of the different aspects of how you make a successful fight scene, because you want to make it not just the two aspects. You know, you want to make sure your character, you want the audience to want your character not to lose, and you also want them to want to win. So basically, this is kind of the hell or the bad over here and the good over here. It's not enough just to go away from one. You have to go towards another. That's what you want to frame it as. You know, this is the fight where this is what's at stake. Basically, to remind everyone, this is kind of where we're moving forward, and this is where we're pushing towards it. But yeah. And probably in the next episode, I'll probably be talking kind of more about what the ending does in terms of the ever after, because I think it does some really, really good stuff on that. So we'll probably go on that. But this kind of just talks about the overall fight scenes that we had going forward with it, because I think it does a really good job. And especially for animes, you really want to make sure that you know how to do these and how to nail them, because this is your bread and butter. This is your meat and potatoes. You gotta nail this if you're wanting to move forward from there. So appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.